What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Tourmaline, and this video is about the proof that the self does not die. Now, of course, The Self Does Not Die is the title of the book that I'm currently reading, and I've gone back and forth whether or not I wanted to finish this book because the premise, the way that I can describe it, it's not as in-depth as Journey of Souls and Memories of the Afterlife. It's these short little stories that really the objective of them, this is my feeling thus far, right? I'm like 50 pages in or 40 pages in, something like that. And my read of it is it's just showing that what was observed and viewed during out of body experiences or near death experiences or whatnot is confirmed to be things that are true, number one. And number two, there's no other explanation for these observations other than their soul literally lifted out of their bodies. They observed things and they retained that information and then were able to relay it once they were back in their bodies. Okay. So again, what's the idea? The idea is a bunch of cases. I think there's 128 cases in the new version of the book. That's the book that I have, that provide some evidentiary basis to say that, hey, there's something to this. There's something legitimate here, that ourselves, our essence exists beyond the body. Now, the reason why I said that maybe I won't read this book is because I'm already in, right? I've already listened to a ton of NDEs. I've been really thinking about this topic a lot for a while now, for I think like a year and a half or 2 years, been watching tons of accounts and testimonies. So I'm on the side of tending, I already tend to believe it. A lot of the things that people relay from their near-death experiences resonates with me. So some of it is just an internal check of like, yes, this makes a ton of sense to me compared to everything else that I've learned in my life in terms of religion, philosophies, and whatnot, in terms of why we incarnate, why we're here, what's the purpose. Like all these things, they relay a very similar message. So I've already bought in. So what's the point? Well, I don't know. I bought this book for a reason, is with the conclusion I've come to currently. And so I think I want to keep reading it and see what I find. Now, maybe this is also valuable and interesting for folks who are a little bit more skeptical. So I figure I'll make a video about this book and kind of what it's about and some of the stories or tales that are included therein that maybe other people will find interesting, and this will lead them to do some more investigation. So I'm going to share what I've read so far, and I'm going to continue to read, and we'll see what else I explore and what else I feel is worth sharing with everybody here. And by the way, I do want to say, I mentioned this multiple times on the channel, my plan here is to share in case anybody else is interested in seeking this type of information like I was, at the start of this journey. But by any means, I don't want anybody to think that if you're Christian or you're Muslim or you're Jewish or you have a particular faith that you feel strongly connected with, that I'm trying to pry you away from that faith. This is not what this is about. This is for people like me who felt that things weren't adding up and they wanted different answers, and they seek this type of information out and it resonates with them like it does with me. So that's what this is about. Just want to put that out there. I've mentioned it multiple times, but without further ado, let's get into it. Now, this introduction talks about NDEs, or out of body experiences as well, and contrasts it to, I think, what's sort of like the mainstream scientific perspective of materialism, that the body, the brain, that is our consciousness. And when our body and brain kind of fade away and die, our consciousness dies and evaporates with it, which I don't subscribe to anymore. I do believe there is more to our identity. And, some people might say that's wishful thinking. Look, I used to be the closest thing to atheist you could consider for a long time. And I was totally at peace and fine with the fact that our life is here. We live it. We just have fun. And then when it's over, no big deal. So I am not leaning on this or latching onto this narrative because it gives me comfort in some specific way. I was fine with it before. I'm latching onto it now because I believe it's hit something within me that I think there's a big element of truth to it. And the entire idea of why we are here and why we incarnate relayed from many of these NDEs, it resonates with me. It makes so much sense. And by the way, the message is generally always very simple. Be here, love people, be caring, be kind, be better, try to level up, try to gain more compassion and empathy, forgiveness, all these other things while we're here, and do our best to continue to raise our vibration and just be better. That's essentially the gist of it. But we're going to talk about this. So here, and I mentioned this before too in another video, that The problem with looking at these accounts and really giving them significant attention is going to contrast in general with the scientific community, and also the way that the general scientific community will gather evidence and look at things and actually be able to study things, right? Like, this is outside that realm, which I'm going to talk about as well, which I think is a little bit unfair, because this evidence is just by nature not going to fall into a lot of the categories and the procedures that we have in science to like verify things. But that doesn't mean we should just discount it completely. That's my 2 cents. But anyways, let's talk about materialism. So it says, according to reductive materialists or reductionists, mind consciousness can be reduced to neurological processes in the brain. According to eliminative materialists, mind and consciousness are antiquated concepts that no longer have a place in today's scientific language. Mind and consciousness do not really exist. They are just words that need to be tossed or eliminated. And according to non-reductive materialists, there is such a thing as a mind or a consciousness, but only as a kind of holistic phenomenon that correlates directly to the complex organization of the brain. By the way, just as an aside, if you do decide to read this book yourself, it definitely does read like a textbook, at least in the introduction part. So just wanted to let you know that. And it's not like Journey of Souls, which is a whole different thing. It's written with these really interesting narratives and stories. But anyways, so it says, just as with the other holistic phenomena, mind cannot be reduced to the underlying processes, although the mind depends on neurological processes on which it is constructed. Mind in its activity is restricted by the brain's condition. So if the brain quits, the mind automatically exits the stage. Again, the two they're saying are inextricably tied. And once the brain and the body ceases to exist, so does the mind and so does consciousness. This perspective also applies to so-called property dualism, a closely related naturalistic school of thought that equates mind with assumed non-material attributes of the brain. If the brain dies, its assumed non-material attributes also vanish. Okay, so now we're going to get into some out-of-body or OBE observations. And here's what I want to start with. Okay, we look at these through a lot of these stories, or the scientific community does, through a scientific lens, and says, well, if these things cannot be verified in a scientific way, if they can't be tested according to specific hypotheses and protocols and procedures, we just discount them. And I think a lot of times the rationale is, well, we can't verify it, so we're going to let it go. Or a lot of these people might be making up these stories for clout, for fame, to be able to write a book. And I'm sure these fraudulent cases exist. That also exists in the scientific community and in all walks of life, right? Certain people are going to try and manipulate the system for little bits of notoriety. But I'm on the other side. I actually do trust most people that give these accounts, because I actually think most people in solid positions, career-wise or whatnot, have way more to lose by talking about these things. But I think a lot of times they feel so compelled to share their experiences that they do it anyways, at the risk of being ridiculed and all these things. So just think about it like this. Think about it with an open mind and an open heart. And yes, there might be some people that are trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but I do think I have to believe that most people that are sharing these accounts are being truthful or being honest. I really do. If the vast majority, I really truly believe that. But here's the thing. If just one or two of these stories are legitimate out of the 5,000 plus that have been documented, that in and of itself, if they're true, forget about being able to test them to a scientific standard. But if you just straight up believe the person that is relaying this information, that is enough to go beyond the materialistic view. Now, I don't think many people out there actually have a pure materialistic view anymore. You obviously, like, right, people subscribe to certain faiths that basically talk about the immortality of the soul and the existence beyond the body. So maybe this relates to a very small percentage or proportion of the community, of humankind, that actually have a purely materialistic viewpoint of consciousness and whatnot. But nevertheless, I just wanted to make that be known. Just think about it with an open mind. Forget about looking at it solely through a scientific lens. A lot of these phenomena, maybe it's not fit to be studied in that way, but just think about it through a human lens. Is everybody talking about this just purely fabricating these things for attention? I highly doubt it. Okay, that's my 2 cents. Now, let's look at this case right here. So there are a number of enumerated things that this patient, while under surgery, I think it was under anesthesia, observed all these things where the brain activity was essentially zero, right? They're under heavy anesthesia, but listen to what all these things that were observed. So number one, the patient said, my head was covered. So they came out of their body, right? The head was covered, so they couldn't have seen it through their eyes. And the rest of my body was draped with more than one sheet. So they saw all of this in the operating room during their procedure. So they floated out and draped in customary sterile fashion. Patient, I could draw you a picture of the saw they used in the medical report. What it was actually open with the saw. Now you could say, hey, well, maybe he just knew that a saw was being used for the procedure. Yes, that may be possible. But again, that is under the assumption that he wanted to fabricate this story after the procedure and act like he saw it when he just knew what the procedure was. Like, I don't know if we can just write it off that way. Yes, there could be another alternative explanation, but this is not what this guy is saying. He's saying that during the procedure, he floated out and he saw all these details, but there's more details. Okay. The patient said the thing they used to separate the ribs with, it was there. It was all draped around you, but you could see the metal part of it. That thing they held my chest open with, that's real good steel with no rust. I mean, no discoloration, real good, hard, shiny metal. And they were talking about a self-retaining retractor was utilized over wound. The patient also said one general area to the right or left was darker than the rest instead of all being the same color. Medical report, the ventricular aneurysm was dissected free. The aneurysm was seen to be very large. Item number 5, he cut pieces of my heart off. He raised it and twisted it with this way and took quite a bit of time examining it and looking at different things. Medical report, an incision was made over the most prominent portion of the aneurysm after the heart had been turned upside down in the pericardial wall. The entire aneurysm was resected. Item 6, patient injected something into my patient said they injected something into my heart. That's scary when you see that thing go right into your heart. Medical report, air was evacuated from the left ventricle with a needle and syringe. So that's what he was talking about there. And item number 7, they took some stitches inside me first before they did outside. The medical report states the wound was closed in layers. The pectoral fascia was approximated with interrupted sutures of 2 to 0. I don't know what this is. Subcutaneous tissue was closed with a running suture, whatever. So again, the point is that all these things that have been purported to have been witnessed were true. They were verified by the medical report. Now, again, you could say there's an explanation, or maybe you heard from this doctor, maybe saw the procedure before. Yeah, maybe, or maybe he's telling the truth and he really levitated out of his body and saw all these things happening to himself, right? And now on top of that, we don't just have one case, we have 128 cases like this in this book. So if you are curious to look at it through more of a scientific lens, look at it through these cases. And I'll end with one thing before I finish, right? I'm a math guy. And let's say all things being equal, which I don't even think this is the likelihood of the probability, but let's just say it's a 50-50 shot for people to lie. I actually think they're more inclined to tell the truth than lie because the ramification can be so bad. You could be so ridiculed. Your livelihood could be at stake, right? If you're telling these stories and saying these things, people can start to look at you as crazy. So I actually think more likely than not, most of these stories are truthful. Okay. But if you give it an even 50-50, all right, and we do the calculation, actually, I'm going to do the calculation for you right now. So it's 1 over 1 out of 2, 0.5. And for every single one of these to be a fabrication, it's going to be 0.5 to the 128th power. Okay. This is 2.938 to the times 10 to the negative 39th power. You know that's the percentage chance that all of these 128, I'm not even talking about the 5,000, but the 128 would all be fabrications. And it's probably even a lower probability than that because I'm assuming a 50-50 chance of somebody telling the truth or somebody being dishonest. And I truly believe people are probably more inclined to be truthful here than dishonest. That's the way I see it. That's 38 zeros and what is that? And then a 3, basically, if you round up. 38 zeros, that's the probability, and then a 3. So take it for what it's worth. Anyways, I'm making this video. Hopefully it resonates with people. Like I said, I'm already in. I've already want to hear more of these stories and really want to see if I can listen to these stories and draw more conclusions about the purpose of life and why I'm here and better understand what I'm supposed to do in my life. But for folks out there who are interested in more cases and more examples of evidence that can't be explained away, this might be a book for you. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for joining. I really appreciate it. If you do like what you see, make sure to click that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.